is Moss from Investor Partner Group coming in live today in relation to how to pick. I want to buy something and it's not a forever home, then do not. I think the change I always feel is the hardest thing, right? It's hard at the beginning, it's messiest in the middle, and it's the best at the end. I use that as an example for developments, right? It's usually hardest at the start, it's messiest in the middle, and it gets better when you get the profits. So how did the change happen? Yeah. What was the transition?
I got to a point where I always knew that I wanted to run my own business, and I knew that I wanted it to be in property of some sort. And so after about, I can't remember, maybe about 5 or 6 years of being in the corporate space, and I knew I was never intended to be there for a long term, I made the decision that I would quit. And I'm not saying people do this, because I look back and I go, I should have done it differently. Quit, and I was going to start an online business. That was the start of the journey, but I was still incredibly raw, naive, and almost stupidly optimistic that I could create this online business, a year or so, and then be able to live off the profits of it. I blame books like, not blame, but I'm thankful. I'm grateful for the books like The 4-Hour Work Week, because that was the thing, was like, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Tim Ferriss with his 4-Hour Work Week. I'm like, all these people, they're creating this wealth and freedom, through running businesses and stuff. That was my first then breaking out of corporate. But again, I won't go into too much detail, but the real clincher for me and the biggest transformation for me was, it's a little bit cliche, but the moment my daughter was born. The moment she was born. Oh. And why I say that was because then I realized I had to be her role model. I had to remove any fear and doubt that I had in myself, because I wanted her to be another level person to what I was, and to not have to go through, I guess, the struggles, the challenges, the doubts that I have, and be able to say, hey, I see mom now and she's confident in what she does. She's a good person, that she doesn't run away from things that she's afraid of. I had to be that person for her and my children. As much as I'd always challenge myself, there were things that were holding me back. Each time now, if I feel this sense of fear about something, or I feel challenged, I'm like, would I be proud of this to say this to my kids? If I'm not going to be proud of what I'm doing, then I've got to really look at myself and going, have I stepped up? I know it sounds like cliche, because as parents, you hear this all the time. You're like, my children have changed my world and everything. And I guess it's true when you're doing it for someone else, not just yourself, because you sort of go with yourself, you can sort of almost take it a little bit easy. But when you've got someone that's keeping you accountable in some way, then you've got a focus that's outside of you, that's going to keep you going.
And so, look, I strongly believe that kids are the biggest catalyst in a person's life. I do also believe that when you talk about life, I look at life as almost a sewer. You get out of it exactly what you put into it, right? So it has to be exactly that. And so my next question, or taking away from this, is, so how did the transition happen from you being who you were? The kid is born now, you have gone from mediocre investing to high net worth investing. What were the changes? What were you doing differently now?
The biggest change was just believing, because I always thought when I started investing, it was the mindset, and I guess it comes down to the education. I always thought I wasn't educated enough in a sense. Like I was just learning in my property journey. I just thought income, serviceability, might be able to do a duplex type thing. And then I always thought I can only earn this much. I always had a ceiling, if you know what I mean. So I always doubted my ability to sort of go, I don't have enough. I didn't look for solutions outside of that. It was only when, and then the other thing was, because I had this self-doubt, I was also afraid to ask for help. I'd ask for help from people that were experts, but like I felt like if I went to someone who was experienced, they would judge me or wouldn't share information with me, particularly in the property space. And so for a lot of years, I felt, I was sort of stuck. It was a bit of a transition and stuff had happened where I just went, you know what? If I'm feeling this way, I'm sure there are lots of other people who feel a bit lost. And that's when I took over the Facebook groups, build a community of property developers to be able to say, hey, let's let's share information. That was when I realized, like, I'm only limited by here, what's in my mind. I've just got to be able to
Yeah.
find the solutions and to be able to be creative and be able to ask others to get to the answers that I want.
Definitely.
And so that was the big thing where I just
Definitely.
went, I don't necessarily need to rely on serviceability. There's always going to be something. There's some way, somehow, we're going to make it happen.
Has there been any unsuccessful ventures or ventures that you've gone in and thought about, okay, I'm going to go down this route, but nothing went as planned
Absolutely.
and, everything?
Absolutely. There's always going to be ones that sort of, don't go too well. But, if they all go smoothly all the time, how do we learn? There definitely has been.
100%.
There's in business and projects. I mean, even the projects now, I'm sure with you, Moss, you come up with something and you're like, oh my goodness, can there not be a day where
Yes.
there's like nothing that screws up? Right.
Definitely.
It's all around, and I look at it being it's the universe or it's God's way of saying, this is how I'm just making you stronger.
Yeah.
This is how I'm
Yeah.
making you ready for the next challenge.
And so is there any one in specific that you would want to really talk about that really didn't go as planned and, you just savaged yourself out from it or saved yourself out from it?
I would say it was that one business where I quit my corporate job, a good paying job, to start an online business.
What was that online business?
That online business was called Task Runners. It was at the time, and the whole idea was to engage people who were in our community to be able to help people, their neighbors or whoever who couldn't do things with people who in the community could do things. So I was thinking of like students, retirees, all of that. A lot of you will be familiar with the business Airtasker.
Airtasker, yes.
Airtasker and Task Runners sort of came out at a very, very similar time. Airtasker I had no idea about venture capital. I had no idea around or an offering or whichever. They had about $2 million more of venture capital than I did. What I thought was that I always needed to put in sweat equity. And
Yeah.
we drained a whole lot of our savings and basically did everything ourselves.
And so right idea, but wrong timing, basically.
Right idea, and I said not the best execution because, again, like I realize now the benefit of investment capital and the benefit of planning and really understanding what you're trying to put together and leveraging other people's skills as well. Not feeling that you need to do everything yourself and be able to say, hi, how can I, if I've got someone who's been successful in launching a similar thing, how can you be an equity owner in that? Or whichever. So that was a big learning from that aspect. And I had to close that down because at the same time, like that business was launched two weeks before my daughter was born. So the real baby took a lot more focus than the online baby.
Yes. And so would you say that was your biggest failure and, those were the learnings that you achieved from doing that? Because naturally what tends to happen is that, people shy away from failure, right? You go through a failure and you feel, you give into the fear. And I always say this, that fear is the fuel that provides power. And so the truth usually sets yourself free. And so how do you come out of these failures if you're not resilient enough, or if you have experienced such a big failure in life? How do you come out and then crawl back out and say, hey, let's fight again, let's put the boxing gloves on and let's go back in the ring?
The first bit is to look at that situation and recognize that I know we use the word failure, but I don't think I've ever thought of it as a failure. I think that's the first point, is to be able to say it was just a learning and recognize
Lesson
that
learned.
Every journey has a lesson, and what can I pick out of that? Because, I have people that I've met from that journey that are still friends with me now, and that I'm doing business with. And this is over 12 years ago. So I look at that and go, that's an incredible win. And that's an incredible, incredible win. And I go, what are the things that I learned in that process that I can do differently now in my other businesses? You're absolutely right. I mean, there is a point where you sort of, you can choose. I think it's a choice. Everyone has a choice to deal with things one way or another. So you can either choose, like something happens. I say this to my kids, right? You can choose to either focus on the good or you can focus on what you think you don't.